On the morning of January 15, 1947, a woman out for a morning walk with her daughter made a horrifying discovery. It was the body of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. She had been sliced in two at the waist and completely drained of blood. Some of her organs, such as her intestines, had been removed and neatly placed underneath her rear. Pieces of her flesh had been cut away from her thighs and breasts, and her stomach was full of human excrement, leaving some to believe that she had been forced to eat it before she was killed. And finally, the killer had sliced each side of her face, from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating what is known as the Glasgow smile. Was this grisly, barbaric act done by someone she knew, or was this act the act of a random, insane killer? This is the story of Elizabeth Short, better known as the Black Dahlia. Before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the dark and mysterious with a little tarot thrown in for good measure, then I am the girl for you. I upload 2 to 3 times a week on this channel, and if you're really a fan of tarot, you can join me on my other tarot, Jennifer Walker Zen. So if this is of interest to you, I would ask you to subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my uploads. Now, let's get into today's story. Elizabeth Short was born on July the 29th, 1924 in Boston, Massachusetts. The third of 5 daughters of Cleo and Phoebe Short, Elizabeth's childhood was filled with one tragedy after another. Initially, her father, who built miniature golf courses, was considered moderately successful. That was, however, until the stock market crash in 1929. During this crash, he was completely wiped out, losing all of his savings. A year later, his car was found abandoned on a Charleston bridge in Boston. The assumption was that he had committed suicide by jumping into the river. This unfortunate act left Phoebe alone to raise 5 children on her own. She had to sell their house and move into a small apartment while working as a bookkeeper to support her family. Adding to her troubles was the discovery that Elizabeth suffered from severe asthma attacks and bronchitis and needed lung surgery when she was just 15 years old. In 1942, Elizabeth's world was turned upside down when her family received a letter from her presumed dead father. As it turned out, he had not killed himself. He had just chosen to leave his family and start a new life in California. He profusely apologized and said he wanted to make amends for his actions by extending an olive branch. The idea of starting over in a new place appealed to Elizabeth, especially since she had just dropped out of high school, while also being told by her doctors that it would be better for her to spend winters somewhere with a milder climate to alleviate her respiratory problems. As soon as she turned 18, she left Massachusetts and joined her father in Vallejo, California. Their relationship was extremely combative and argumentative from the very start. In early 1943, she moved out and found a job in a place called Camp Cook. Things weren't exactly working out for her the way she had planned. So once again, she packed her things and relocated to Florida, where she met an Army Air Force officer named Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr. He proposed to her while he was recovering from injuries he sustained during World War II, to which she accepted. Unfortunately, however, their potential marriage was not to be, due to him being killed in a plane crash a few weeks before the end of the war. A year later, in 1946, Elizabeth relocated again to Los Angeles. She worked as a waitress and lived in one-room apartment behind a nightclub. It was rumored that she occasionally resorted to prostitution to make ends meet. However, this has never been proven. It was also claimed that she was hoping to make it big in Hollywood. However, no real evidence to support this claim has ever surfaced. The last known person to see Elizabeth Short alive was a 25-year-old salesman named Robert Redmond Manley. Manley claimed to have dropped Elizabeth off in front of the Biltmore Hotel in Hollywood. The next day, when her body was found, he was picked up for questioning, but let go a short time later. Due to having a solid alibi for the time of the murder. He also agreed to take a lie detector test on 2 separate occasions and passed, alleviating him as a suspect. It was around this time that the real killer began sending police letters expressing his anger towards them for giving someone else the attention that he deserved. A few days later, the killer called the office of Los Angeles Examiner. Speaking with the editor, he expressed his disappointment at how the case had been presented. He also claimed that he intended to turn himself in eventually, but wanted police to try to catch him a little bit longer. Lastly, the caller promised to confirm that he was indeed the real killer by sending some of Elizabeth's belongings, which he did. A short time later, an envelope arrived at the newspaper which contained Elizabeth's birth certificate, business cards, and photographs, and address book with the name Mark Hansen written on the cover. Mark Hansen was a Hollywood nightclub owner who occasionally allowed Elizabeth to sleep over due to her close relationship with his girlfriend. That same day, one of Elizabeth's shoes and her handbag were found. However, no evidence could be found due to them being wiped down with gasoline. The killer continued communicating with both the paper and the police using magazines and newspaper clippings. One of the more puzzling letters stated, "I will give up Dahlia's killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." It is unknown exactly what this statement meant. Desperate to get some evidence, a Los Angeles City councilman offered $10,000 reward for any information on the Black Dahlia's killer. This offer on the part of the councilman, though well-intended, made a bad situation worse. Police were swamped with hundreds of fake confessions and grim hoaxes that led nowhere. Frustrated, they enlisted the help of the FBI to help look at medical and dental students in Southern California for possible suspects. This yielded dozens of leads, but none good enough for an actual arrest. As perplexing as things were, there still may have been an actual witness. A man who lived in the area came forward saying that he drove by the lot where Elizabeth's body was found on the night of the murder. He was throwing away some garden clippings, but as he approached the lot, he saw another man there at around 9:00 p.m. The witness described the person as a middle-aged, thin, medium height, wearing a tan coat. The witness left in his car, but once more went around the block and drove past the lot again. His second pass startled the other man enough that he went inside his own car and sped off. Unfortunately, nothing more could be made of this tip. Although no arrests were made, there are at least 4 noteworthy suspects to this killing. The first I previously mentioned as Mark Hansen, the man whose address book was sent to the newspaper along with Elizabeth's belongings. He gave a very contradictory statements while being investigated by detectives. Hansen had tried to pursue Elizabeth in an intimate way, but this advance were rejected. He was never charged with anything due to a lack of evidence. However, it has been rumored that Hansen used his wealth and connections in the police to exclude him from further investigations. Second is Leslie Dillon, a 27-year-old bellhop who began asking very strange questions about the case. He began writing to discuss the case with the LAPD. The psychiatrist Dr. J. Paul D. River, he was also at one time our mortician assistant, so he was used to dealing with corpses and knew how to clean and drain them of blood. Claimed he was writing a book and had interest in the sadists and psychopaths. He also suggested his friend named Jeff Connors was the man who killed Elizabeth. However, police began to believe Dillon himself was the murderer, but that was ruled out after finding out that he may have been in San Francisco during the time of the murder, although this was never proven conclusively. Also during this time, Jeff Connors was looked into and was discovered to be a handyman for Columbia Studios. However, no evidence or connection to Elizabeth could be found, so he was dropped as a potential suspect. The third is Dr. Patrick O'Reilly, whom Elizabeth knew through Mark Hansen's nightclub. O'Reilly had a very violent streak, and he had previously been convicted for assault with a deadly weapon for taking his secretary to a motel where he beat and tortured her. But even though he had the proper skill set to commit such a murder, no evidence was ever found linking him to the murder. The fourth and final suspect is George Hodel. He came to the attention of the police in 1949 when he was charged but acquitted of a sexual assault of his own daughter. He was a medical doctor suspected in the death of the secretary due to a drug overdose. He was also interviewed in 1949 in a different killing known as the Green Twig murder, and even though his house was bugged, no incriminating evidence was ever found. Huddle died in 1999, but it was reintroduced as a prominent suspect courtesy of his son, Stephen Huddle, a retired LAPD detective who was convinced his father killed Elizabeth Short. He found evidence such as personal photographs of a young woman he believes to be Elizabeth. He also found letters from his father whose handwriting matches the letters from the killer sent to the newspapers decades ago. Now that you know the story, let's get some answers. Join me in my investigation room. Hello, welcome to my investigation room. Our first question, and by the way guys, I just want to preface this on, this is for entertainment purposes only. This is going to be, I'm going to be using 4 different card systems: the Tarot, the Lenormand, the Kipper, and the Gypsy. So, and our first question is, did Elizabeth know her killer? So, this is a very interesting thing that popped up here because it is not clear cut. I would love to see that every deck has a yes here. But I dug deeper on this and I realized that, first of all, Elizabeth was blindfolded and tied up. And it happened very suddenly, and she was taken away very suddenly. I do feel like she knew of either 1 or 2 people, but there was multiple people involved. There were 3 main people and possibly more involved with her killing, so that's very interesting. I see also here that there was a friend and there was something false about that friend. So definitely we're pointing to some kind of friendship she had that was false, or it was deceptive, or it was distrusting and felt trapped, obviously, because it was a very sudden thing. It looks like there was travel involved, or a car or a vehicle, because again, we see the ship card, we see this card which talks about some kind of distance, this talks about travel. So it looks like what happened was either she was waiting somewhere and then suddenly they grabbed her, took her into a vehicle and took her away to another place, and she wasn't able to see, so because she was blindfolded and tied up. She did know of 1 or 2 of the people that were involved, but I didn't feel like she knew there was multiple people involved with this situation. So our next question is, was one of the 4 suspects that I referenced when I looked over the case, was one of the 4 suspects the one that could have been her killer? Entertainment purposes only, let's take a look. Yes, we have a lot of yes cards. Well, the next question is, was George Hodel one of Elizabeth's killers? Now, this came up pretty strange, and I'm going to talk about this right now. Okay, so as I told you guys, I felt like there could have been multiple people involved with this, and then I'm looking here, and it looks like there is some strange cards around it with this person, so you can't say that this person wasn't involved some way. So, because I do have positive cards, but there is some issues around it. It shows like a party, and it shows some sense of despair and a joyful energy, and almost like some kind of ritual. Okay, you see there's a spiritual, you see a party, something spiritual, something secret. That's very interesting. Again, a spiritual oriented card. And also when I was diving deeper, you can see the Judgment card, another kind of spiritual card here. Definitely there was something offered here when it came to this person, but they didn't accept it. There was some kind of news about it. There was a sense of accomplishment or completion around this situation, and there was this potential opportunity that came up for this person, and they were a little bit cautious here. But they could have been someone that could have been part of it. Definitely you can't rule that out here with these cards, because it has 2 positives, which points to a yes, another 2 positives, but we see that there's multiple people cards. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn energy, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces energy. And it's very interesting that a spiritual oriented card will also come up with a party card, or a part where there's a group of people and a sense of despair and this joyful energy around this death of Elizabeth. So very strange cards. Yeah, definitely like to hear from you guys in the comments below about this. All right, so our next question is, did authorities in Elizabeth's case, entertainment purposes only of course, suppress any kind of information? Well, I will tell you guys that there was definitely some issues there around it, okay? It seems like there was something to do with money or an opportunity that came up that caused a lot of confusions there. There was something hidden, deceptive here in this opportunity, and someone who took an abrupt action. There was a lack of courage in this situation. If I go like this and see what would that lack of courage, it's something about money or an opportunity, because that's what Pentacles means. It could be something of value, so it could represent money. Hear from you guys in the comments below, and your feeling of what happened with this particular case in the comments below for my fellow tarot readers and my intuitives. Definitely want to hear from you guys in the comments below. And if you guys like it this way, want me to continue this way, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments below. All right, my darlings, I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys soon.